most to all of us, I hope, certainly to me, are Dr. Cummings' family. And I'm very happy to introduce you to them. We'll have Will Cummings, who is Larry Cummings' son. He is also a graduate of this school. And he and his wife, Maria, who is from Kitchener as well, both of them were members of the 1979 Rome class. That is the very first class that went to Rome. So we are also so happy that their children, Anthony and Sarah, are here with their mother and father tonight. And of course, we would have liked to have had Elizabeth and Anne, Larry's daughters. They both sent very warm wishes. They are both absolutely delighted that we have, and I will say this in parentheses, but with great emphasis, finally gotten around to the actual formal dedication of the main lecture hall at the School of Architecture to their father, father-in-law, and grandfather, who is important to many of us in the room. Many of his students are here. Some of you may know that 5 of the current faculty members of the University of Waterloo School of Architecture, full-time faculty members, were taught by Dr. Cummings. It's his curse that we're all still here. And I have standing behind me, of course, a close protege of Dr. Cummings and my second ever cultural history teacher, Bob Wiltshire. So what I'm going to do is just read a little text that I have written. I'm going to call on Bob to say a few words about our common mentor, Larry Cummings. After which, Will has brought a poem that Larry...
My phone may die before you get there. I got a warning right before I talk to you.
Will it come back? Yeah, we'll do this. And if I need help from Anthony later, I'll get it. And then I'm going to call on Will and Marie to come up and perhaps they can decide what they want to say at the time, but what they're going to do is rip this sheet of black fabric off the wall behind me. I want to thank everyone who's been involved right off the bat, thank everyone who's been involved in producing this, but most especially, of course, Donald Mackay, who is the designer of the dedicatory plaque. Dr. Robert Van Pelt, who is the author of the text that appears on it. And I will say that Van Pelt is extremely angry with those of us who scheduled this event because he's off somewhere getting another award or something. And he can't be here tonight, but he sends, I mean, this is for him as well. And of course our friends at MCM who fabricated it and got it to us on Monday, which is unbelievable. Like, wow, 4 days in advance. So I will begin the dedication. Dr. Larry Cummings read the motion at the University Senate on April 7th, 1967, proposing the creation of the School of Architecture at the University of Waterloo. When Dr. Cummings passed away on June 24th, 2010, the School of Architecture lost a man who, to all intents and purposes, was its founder. In many ways, the school today is the extension of his vision. Speaking very personally, he is the measure and the inspiration for everything I have done or tried to do here for the last 48 years. He was my teacher. He had an authority that seemed to come from outside time, almost oracular, questioning, ironic. I always recognize him in the passage, the words of Alcibiades from Plato's Symposium, which I read every year to the first-year class. Alcibiades says of Socrates, "When you agree to listen to the talk of Socrates, Cummings, it might seem at first to be nothing but absurdity. Such words and phrases are wrapped outside it like the hide of a boisterous satyr. Packasses and smiths and shoemakers and tanners are what he talks about. And he seems to be always saying the same things in the same words so that any ignorant and foolish man would laugh at them. But when they are opened out and you get inside them, you will find his words are first full of sense, as no others are. Next, most divine, and containing the finest images of virtue, and reaching furthest, in fact, reaching to everything which it profits a human to study, who is to become noble and good." Dr. Cummings' cast of characters may have been somewhat different, but he was our Socrates, our teacher. I don't remember smiths or tanners, but packasses and shoemakers were part of the story, along with shoes that didn't fit, and of course the cowhands and sluggers who are always stepping up to bat. So for those who chose to listen, the effect was just as the Athenian general described. Space unfolded in multiple dimensions, time collapsed, and the world of moral and imaginative order was revealed through the texts we read and the tales he told. In the often less than perfect images that seemed deliberately to mock the processes of mechanical reproduction and goad us all to see the real thing. In the maps and charts hand-drawn on the blackboard, growing from a kernel of fact or a place by curves and spirals worthy of the Book of Kells. The big picture was never simple, but the patterns of the human spirit were momentarily revealed. These were charts to embellish for a lifetime. Plans for our own personal daylight raids on the absolute. Historians may never agree on who made the School of Architecture, but I have no doubt our distinct nature is to be credited to him. He called us an academy. He imagined a community in the image of a salon. He talked of education and the cultivation of skills, taste, and judgment of a professional as if our Vitruvian integrity, once the designers of cities, buildings, engines, and timepieces, had never been sundered. We owe a great deal of ourselves to him. Culture, play, the play, and an intellectual standard when we remember. Naming the lecture theatre will carry the memory forward. I could not be happier. I could not be prouder. May his spirit always move us in this space. Bob?
Yeah. Well, I don't know how I can top that one. I think I could add some adjectives. He was a remarkably knowledgeable teacher. His range of knowledge was magisterial. I've never seen it again, and at my age, I don't know whether I will. He could teach a course and put the material into the big picture. For me, that was the most impressive. I came from a family on both sides almost destroyed by the history of the first part of the 20th century. And if I learned anything from my mother and father, it is, before you act, you better know the big picture, or you might get sucked into something that's very evil. So whatever he taught, he was clear to give that. I guess the Americans are learning that right now. Without a doubt, and there's no fuss about this, the school would not be here, and this kind of school would not exist without it. If that means something, I can assure you that that is part of the truth. I was very privileged because when I first went to university as a student, I walked into a school that was just starting out for the first time. And one of the three of the triumvirate that were carrying it was Larry Cummings. I didn't know what I wanted to do. He was teaching English. I heard him a little bit. I thought, oh, English, that's what I'll do. That's what I'll do. I was there for 4 years. I graduated. I went to graduate school, got an MA. I didn't want to be a university professor, that's for sure. I got a call from him, and he said, will you come back and teach at St. Jerome's? So I did. I said for a year, for sure. And he said, that's all, that's okay. So when I went back, it was, I think 67, 68, and I realized he was in the midst of creating another school with another couple of guys. I thought, oh boy, I'd love to be part of that. And eventually he said, you know, Bob, it was a tough burden. Both schools were very, how do you create a school? Huh? How do you put it on the map? In the 60s, you know, everything was happening. A lot of schools were being created. Most of them were F-, you know, as far as I could tell. Well, how do you create a school that will distinguish yourself? The School of Architecture was a particularly hard one because engineering wanted it. They, in fact, were the first to think of it. While the provost and the vice president who was the provost of the university, he wanted to create a faculty of environmental studies. And he thought, well, one of the jewels of this will be architecture, planning, geography. How do you make that work, too, you know? There was only one other university at that time that had a faculty of environmental studies. And it was a difficult thing to create. This is how Cummings helped put the first school on the map. I was, you know, in second year. I could see that this new school, St. Jerome's, you know, they couldn't really graduate in 4 years, people in every discipline. But they were going to go for sure with English. That's partly why I was in it. And show the university that they could do it. There were other schools there, colleges, Christian colleges, Lenison and Conrad and Grebel, but they were just sort of like service colleges for the university. But St. Jerome's was going to be a university within a university. You can see the clashes already. It was, you know, it wasn't a threat to engineering or mathematics, computer science, but it was a small, very good arts faculty. And they said to themselves, you know, we graduate students in English and history and philosophy. Now we got another right here on campus. How is this going to work? Well, here's a fact. When I graduated, only 7 had graduated from the English program at St. Jerome's. 3 in the first bunch and 4 in the second. Out of those 7, 2 won Woodrow Wilson scholarships. very prestigious American scholarship. Princeton, Yale, Harvard, they always complained about how few they got. The University of Waterloo had never had a Woodrow Wilson scholar. And this one man, of the 7 students, had produced 2. All I can remember about it was I had to read, read, study, study, write, write, read, read, study, study, write, write. Because he was determined to pay us back for coming to this little school in more ways than one. He was a builder of communities. I think Rick has made that clear, of academic communities. But where did all that come from? How did he know how to do it? Well, he learned how to do it at St. Jerome's, and when he came here, when he started to develop machinations that would lead to the School of Architecture, he knew how you did it. The students have to shine right away, or you are going nowhere. You're not going to attract faculty, you're not going to attract the attention of other places, and you're not going to attract the best students in the province of Ontario if students don't shine. And I'd say he devoted himself to that shine in the beginning. That's how you create a school. No other way. No other way. Well, Rick told me I should be very brief. So I'm going to leave you with, who was he? Who was he? No, actually, Corky, he was the president of St. Jerome's. He discovered him. He was looking for a job, and Corky said, come here, and gave him all kinds of advantages for coming here, because I'm sure Corky saw, this guy is what I want. This is how we're going to do it. Corky was a genius and a visionary, and he could read that all the way from Waterloo to South Dakota, where he was. But I'm going to take you back a little further. I'm going to take you back to 1945. A world in chaos, a world devoted to massacre, massacres occurring in Europe, massacres occurring in Asia. And amidst those massacres was a 19-year-old kid from St. Louis who was an orderly in a medic regiment on one of the aircraft carriers that were carrying the Marines to the islands of Japan. What he saw as an orderly in that on those ships is unimaginable, because of course the Japanese fought well and viciously, as did the Americans. So usually they would lose about half their troops, and then they would come back with the wounded. And island after island, he saw all of that. Then he was part of the occupation troops in Japan. And this is the story I remember most. It took him a long time before he told me this, but I think he wanted me to know it so that I could understand him a little better. Because I always wondered, this passion for creating academic communities, what is it? He was on a train that was taking occupation American troops to the south of Japan. The engineers had gone ahead because they destroyed all the infrastructure. The Americans were there bombing, and they had to make these train tracks so the train could go. And he was on the train. He was reading an epic, a piece of poetry called "The Fairy Queen" at 19. And the troops were really, acting up, having fun, like troops do, Marines do. So he wanted a quiet place, and they were very close to the front of the train. And he got out of the car he was in, and there was the coal car. I mean, this was, a train that could barely make go. It went by coal and steam. And there was a Japanese soaker who was shoveling coal into it. You should have 3 or 4, but there was only really one. He sat down to read his book. And they're chugging up a sort of hill. And they came over the hill. And he looked, and he said, it was just all kind of flat, with a few, some little rooms here and there. And he turned to the stoker and he said, what is this place? Where are we? And he said, the stoker looked at him with dark eyes and said, Hiroshima. What do you think it does to a 19-year-old boy to come over a mountain and see Hiroshima? I think for most people, Vicky was sensitive, sensible. He surely thought, oh, if we could do it to them, they could do it to us one day too. What kind of world is this? Well, I'm not sure where his thoughts went from there, but I know that somehow that was at the very center of the man who thought we must make communities of education and learning or perish. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. William, Larry's son, passed me his cell phone, and on it, a text message from his sister, Anne. From Beth. Sorry, Beth. Which is an image of a poem that Larry Cummings wrote in 2006. It's a short poem. It's called Helter Skelter, and I think it sheds a great deal of light on both what Bob said and what I said. Helter Skelter, 2006. All day I've been every minute making this past, along with billions of others, helter-skelter with no plan. I eye things around me to see what's next. For what's more remote, I squint and am puzzled, indescribable, but impelled along. The whole world's a riddle, except the past, which I right off edit and dress up into more or less believable phantasms. For such stories, there's some sort of plot, and less of befuddled guesswork, even with some rest. More or less, more or less. Helter Skelter. I'm going to call on William, Maria, Anthony, Sarah to come up. If they would like to say some words, I would welcome them to do so. And then I would welcome them to remove the veil. Will, Maria, Anthony, Sarah.
Well, I'm really happy this is happening. I don't know, maybe what I should do is, can you hear me?
That's right.
Yep.
He was obviously a demanding scholar, and done wonderful things that brought us all here right now. You know, I'm inclined to share maybe something more personal rather than academic, because he was my dad. I mean, he grew up a poor boy in St. Louis in the Depression. Got himself to school, met my mother in high school, and of course they got married as soon as the war was over. And I agree with what you're saying, that the mom made a big difference in his life. And it made a big difference in all our lives, let's face it, because now we know we destroy ourselves. Before that happened, people didn't know that. It's a different world. And he felt like it was broken. Morally, especially. Because, you know, I think most of us can agree that the morals are actually dropping everywhere. And I think that's what he's raging against. In the formation of the schools, and you know, some of it I was too young to know what was going on. I just remember my dad being on the phone for endless hours and getting all fired up, and he'd get off the phone and he'd still be fired up. And my mom was the only one who could do it. She would just touch his arm and say, "Oh, Larry." And he was like Susan the Beast. He would just settle right down. You know? So she was a big part of anything he did. He did it for her, I believe. He was a good gardener, had beautiful gardens. With my mom's help, she did a lot of the work. As a child, I mean, as a young guy, high school kid, I guess, he loved baseball. He was a first baseman, left-handed, and was a good hitter, so they say. And my mom always, until she died, she called them the boys of summer. And she would, it was very soothing to her to hear a baseball game on the radio. It brought her back to happier times. Because that game doesn't change. Yeah, like I said, he had some pretty high standards. Academically, he was very demanding. And morally, he had a pretty rigid set of morals too. And if you got on the wrong side of those morals, it was a long road back. I imagine a few people here might know that. I do. But, you know, he was always talking. He always had something to say, and it was always pretty good. And one of the reasons I'm convinced that I'm not a very good public speaker is that I became a good listener. Because he captivated. I mean, you could poke him and a song would fall out. He had a repertoire of songs that was unbelievable. And he knew them. He knew the variations on them too. Because he did a lot of driving and he sang with the songs on the radio. So, and he memorized them, I guess. But, you know, he's always telling stories, fables, myths. You know, he would develop things for us as kids. You know, I don't know stories, just, it was kind of constant. And it was much like the way it was here. When he talked, I mean, he would take over a room just by walking in and talking. Because people would like to listen to him. He was smart. And he got to it. And that's about all I got to say, but it's pretty bad. Sorry. I could do better, couldn't I? But I can't right now. I'm just so happy to know that y'all remember kind of what that means. Thank you.
We hereby dedicate the lecture theater, main lecture theater at the School of Architecture at the University of Waterloo to Dr. Lawrence A. Cummings. Yes, Maria.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm feeling it.
Oh,
No. No, I met Will when I was 14, and so I've been in the family a long time. My father-in-law, you know, the students used to ask me, is he the same at home as he is in the classroom? To me, the answer was yes. He was always, I came from a family of factory workers in business. Will was the scholars. I didn't know Shakespeare. I never had a story when I was a child. And when I met Will, it was a blessing. I learned everything. I couldn't get enough. I was a sponge and a child again. I couldn't go to Shakespeare unless I was able to read Shakespeare. And classical music, it was almost like this was who I was. It was such a birth. We went on, and when Mom died in 2005, before she did, she said, Maria, will you take care of Dad? And I said, I always will take care of Dad. At that moment, I rose to he became my best friend. He was a scholar, and he was my patient until I kissed him and he died in our home. The thing is when he did die, I never realized that man deserved a golden plate. I had no idea. I never had an education. I never knew I was worth it. He treated me like I was the business person, always pulled the chair up and said, you're dealing the business, you're doing this. We were best friends. It was so hard, and to this day I've lost my best friend. Someone that I could really relate to in this world, as you can with your partner for so many years, because the world keeps changing and you keep trying to hold on that you can have a conversation across the room and understand one another. I miss him very much, and I thank you all, because he lived through this day, and I know he's here now, and I know his blue eyes are shining, and he's so happy. I thank you for believing in him and for struggling and for everywhere that you've been, because he deserved it. And I'm proud to be his daughter and his daughter-in-law. And thank you, everyone, for what you've done.
I've been to a lot of dedications, but not many like this one. So I would invite you all now to enter the lecture room, take your seats, and we will go into the next chapter of tonight's events. Richard Shim is the Please join us.
Larry A. Cummings.
At the Larry A. Cummings Lecture Theatre. Please now. Thank you.